This is Mike Franklin, the property tax guy, and today we're going to talk about assessor fraud. I've Googled up a few cases, examples of what some of the things that go on. Um, the the assessor um, is good assessors should be highly respected, and they're extremely important because they establish equity and if the job is done properly, maintain the integrity of the property tax system, which is extremely important in supporting business, but also equity in business, but also in supporting the institution of home ownership. And um, and so it's just very important that it maintain the appearance of being above board because when you own a property, if you don't pay your taxes, they'll auction it. And in New York State, you don't get the equity. So that's not even real, true ownership. That's renting. But you have to maintain the integrity of the process to maintain the illusion of home ownership. So it's extremely important that the assessments be done properly. And it's also important that taxpayers be treated like customers. Property owners, there can be a lot of stress involved in home ownership and the expenses, and property taxes are perpetual. You can pay off a mortgage, but you can't pay off those taxes. So it's an extremely important job, and I highly respect good assessors. And uh, the most common form of fraud that I've seen, there's some egregious cases that are extreme, but the most common form of fraud is essentially being paid to agreeing to do a job and being paid to do a job and then not doing it. Now that might not reach the definition of fraud, because they tend to just they won't renew you if you don't do the job. But the thing is that if you're like a home uh, improvement contractor and you take money to do a job and you don't do it, it's you read regularly about those people being arrested. And assessors have they agree to do a job, and part of the doing the job is to treat taxpayers with respect and dignity and be transparent and accountable and and to get the figures right, and apply the techniques. And if a taxpayer contacts the assessor, the assessor should respond to them promptly and get back to them and look at the situation. It's okay to apply mass assessment techniques. It's necessary when you have hundreds and sometimes thousands of properties to value, and so it's necessary. But if a taxpayer calls a situation to your attention, it's your obligation um, to look into it. You don't have to roll over for taxpayers, but you have to look into it. It's your job to have an opinion of value. Take a look at it, and if you agree, make an adjustment. If you don't, just let them know, because a lot of taxpayers mistake high taxes with high assessment, and they aren't necessarily the same. It's high taxes come from high school budgets, high schools building professional football stadiums or whatever, and town and county budgets and things of that nature. That's a separate issue. The assessor is just trying to establish fair market value to use as a percentage, your percentage of the whole, to establish your portion of the budget. And so if it comes out, if the fair market value is correct and taxes are high in your perception, it's got nothing to do with the assessor. So, but anyway, their job is to do their best and to answer the phone and be respectful and transparent and accountable as to what they're doing. They need to substantiate what it is that they're doing. They can't just say it's so because they said so. That is not doing the job. That is not a proper valuation method. They need to be accountable for where they came up with the figure. And they probably feel that people are trying to piecemeal them or dissect what it is that they're doing, to advantage, but it's you got to get to the figure, and you need to substantiate your figure. I've had assessors say, "Oh, I've been in the business for 30 years. I've been in the business for, I won't say 50 years." Yeah, well, that's great, but you know, you need to substantiate, where you got your numbers from, and that's part of the job. And as far as I'm concerned, if you can't do that, you're not doing what it is that you agreed to do. You're not doing what it is that you're paid for. So that's the most common. Um, but as far as you know, fraud in the criminal aspect, to me that can be marginally criminal. I mean, you don't see people prosecuted for that kind of thing, but perhaps you should. When they're just so blatant about it. But one case was really a crazy case in town of Greece over by Rochester, where Kodak Park is. We had an assessor um, who made a deal with an employee of Kodak, and the employee of Kodak had an appraiser, and so the assessor would artificially raise the Kodak property taxes to the tune of millions of dollars, and then the Kodak employee would hire this appraiser, and then they'd use that to get it reduced back to what it should have been in the first place. So it was an inflated assessment, so that the appraiser could charge a percentage of the decrease that he received, and then the three of them would split the proceeds to the tune of huge amounts of money. And anyway, I believe that the Kodak employee ratted the other two out and got a lesser sentence, but still a significant one. And the other two, I believe, died in prison with extended prison stays. And well, they should. That's just outrageous. They're living down in Florida, high in the hog, and you know, yeah, it's just crazy. But that's what they did. There was another case in New York City that's kind of hilarious. It's on the screen right now, um, where there was a guy who was worked in the New York City assessment office for 30 years, and then after he retired, he went into the business of helping people challenge their property taxes. Kind of like what I do, but for high rises in Manhattan. And so the guy was really tied in, and he had connections in the assessor's office. So he would take bribes to and he would pass the bribes on onto people in the assessor's office. Like 18 people were participated in this scheme, and so they would get kickbacks for dropping these people's taxes. Over the course of 30 years, and just huge amounts of money for the biggest buildings in Manhattan. And it was kind of funny, later on, they wanted to, pin, Trump to it, and um, for the election purposes, and one of the guys who was convicted, well, the main guy who ran the scheme, he died before they had a chance. He was 88 years old or something, 85 years old, and he died before they had a chance to convict him. And so he was the guy that knew all the contacts. So, just miraculously, they couldn't pin all these people, because it was half the major people in New York City. And it's like, oh, he died, so we can't prosecute anybody, hilarious. But they're trying to pin it on Trump. And to me, as one of the people who paid the bribe, one of the guys one of the assessors who was convicted, he was already convicted, so he had no problem squealing, saying that, Trump was involved. Of course, he had no proof, and you're just using it to slander Trump, as they always do. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that he didn't do it. Sounds like something he might do. But the thing is, I think that he would be a little bit more clever about that, because he would, if he were to get involved in something like that, he would do go through motions to make certain he doesn't get caught, because he's not stupid. But But yeah, so they try to turn it around for political purposes, and so the only time you see these things, prosecuted is when it's for political purposes. Otherwise you see nothing. It's like real estate licensing. Nobody has ever been prosecuted for selling real estate without a license in New York State ever. And so the attorney general would have to be the ones to do that, and they don't get involved with this stuff unless it's of some political benefit to them. Like for example, the attorney general going after Andrew Cuomo, for this nonsense because she wants to be governor, and that's the kind of stuff that they do. Once in a while, they'll go after car dealers because people don't like car dealers, and so once in a while they'll just isolate somebody to for political gain. But other than that, they don't get involved in it. But that was a huge case, and it all amounted to nothing in the end, because it would have indicted half the major players in the city. They'd all be going to jail. Hilarious. Um, I noted an election fraud. Most assessors are appointed; they're not elected, and they had some guy forging ballots, um, mail-in ballots because it was a close race. But that's really got nothing to do with assessment. So there are cases that but to me the real crime is assessors not doing the job that they've agreed to do, and it happens pretty regularly. But I just want to say that a good assessor is a highly important person and someone that should be respected. It's a difficult job, and no matter how good a job you do, somebody's not going to be happy. So it's not the most pleasant job in the world to have, and so when somebody's able to do it properly, I applaud them. I mean, it doesn't have to be antagonistic. You just look into it, and if you agree, you agree. If you disagree, you very cheerfully point them to their appeal options. It isn't a big deal, and but do the valuations properly. It's okay to apply mass assessment techniques, but if somebody calls an individual case to your attention, look at it individually and establish whether or not they may have a point, whether or not there's an error in the inventory. I had one case where the neighbor, the property owner, his neighbor, he was paying a third of the neighbor's waterfront property taxes for 20 years, and the assessor refused to look at it. And so, I had to go to the county. I mean, that's just wrong. And could care less. Couldn't be bothered, and that's wrong. And the assessor was disrespectful and antagonistic. And I believe an assessor that behaves that way, needs to be removed if they can't correct their ways. And so to me, that right there is a form of fraud. Now that doesn't mean that they should be going to jail for it. It just means that probably shouldn't be in the position anymore. And so that's that. Let's see. And what you'll see is some of these assessors have been in the business for 30 years. So I saw a town where a property owner complained that his assessment was significantly higher than all. He analyzed all the town board people, the town supervisor, the county legislator, the assessor, the town clerk. I mean, all of theirs were just it was just ridiculous. It was just so obvious that they were patronizing, their cronies and their friends, and to me, that's a form of fraud, and it's just you know, and I've seen when there's situations where there's waterfront communities, and there's seasonal property owners who are from out of the area. They often like to stick the tax burden onto those people. And I've seen the towns will hire an assessor not be for their valuation skills, but for their um, but because they feel as though that they can control them. So it's not always just the assessor who's the culprit. It's the town board and the town supervisor playing the assessor as a puppet. And sometimes assessors can be quite autonomous, and sometimes they're puppets, and anything in between. But so it's not all necessarily on the assessor. Sometimes the town board and town supervisor can be can be in on it, and so you know it's concerning. And of course, when you've got an assessor who's been an assessor for 30 years, he or she knows all the tricks of the trade. And when they've been in that long, it can be very concerning as to what it is that they've learned that they can get away with. And that's disturbing, as well. They know that they have the power to ignore people. They have the power to do nothing. Um, and and for example, in commercial cases, you'd have to go to state Supreme Court in order to challenge it. And so they know that people won't spend the money on attorney's fees because it doesn't make economic sense to make a state Supreme Court case over a valuation method. And so they know that they could get away with that. And so they know exactly what it is that they can get away with. And so they do. And they sometimes will what's also illegal is selective assessment, and that's pretty common. They have a motivation to try to get everything to 100%. So any opportunity they can get to have any justification to to raise some of these properties, so that they can get to 100%, which provides the perception that they're doing their job properly. But sometimes they go too far when they're doing that, and they selectively assess a property. I had a case where an assessor, had an issue with the guy. She wanted to get everything towards 100%, but he'd purchased the property recently, and he subdivided it, which gave her justification to reassess it. And so, a field that he had that had previously been pasture, she decided to switch to residual because the rate was higher, and that allowed the assessment to gravitate towards the purchase price. It's just disingenuous. It's just improper. And then she and the town attorney tried to get the case dismissed based on a technicality that didn't even exist to cover for the fact that they were selectively assessing the property. It's fraud, and it's inappropriate, but it goes on all the time. And it's not an isolated incident. It's a regular occurrence. And to me, assessors that behave that way, they need to be removed from out. They need to be educated, and they need to be given the opportunity to change. And if they can't do it, they need to be removed. If you agree to do the job, do the job. But anyway, there you have it. This is Mike Franklin, the property tax guy. Thank you.